Hello everyone, welcome back to another average review, and guess what? Another deluxe Marvel Legends X-Men release. This time though, it's not a big figure per se, it's a figure and vehicle release. That's right, we're taking a look at the Marvel Legends Professor X and Hoverchair. Now looking at the box, and this is probably one of the longest Marvel Legends boxes, at least, in terms of verticality, compared to how short it is horizontally, since it's just sort of normal Marvel Legends window box height, at least the old design. On the side, we see some art of Xavier in his hover chair. On the other side, we see that mirrored, and on the back, we see this actually really cool looking render of the figure. It's a really cool background of Xavier in the Danger Room, I think, and we also see some images of a bunch of features of the figure, including the head, the helmet, a little switch hidden inside his hover chair, a little blanket for his legs, and the hover piece. On the other side of the back, we see a pretty cool bio for Professor X and a cross cell for a figure we already actually took a look at, the Deadpool corpse, and Deadpool core, not a dead body, and the little Deadpool scooter, too. So, yeah, pretty cool, deluxe vehicle style box for this Xavier. But come on, let's take a look, can't talk today, at a figure of the most classic design of the X-Men's founder. Alright, getting the figure out of the box, and I suppose we should start out with the base figure, Professor X. Now, there isn't really much to say about this figure since it's just on your standard Marvel Legends suited body mold. It is, of course, painted green, and he does have that striped blue and black tie, but yeah, there isn't really much. It's a decent Marvel Legends suited body with some, very basic but still pretty decent paint, and this really good Professor X, telepath, powers hand. But the head sculpt on this figure is super good. I mean, this is probably one of my favorite Professor X head sculpts on any figure. It's just such a good representation of his classic design. I know this joke's been made a million times, but classic Professor X looks a lot like Grant Morrison. I mean, the resemblance to them is really uncanny. I'm just saying, if they weren't bringing Patrick Stewart back as Professor X for Avengers Doomsday, they should have just gotten Grant Morrison. It would have been a perfect likeness. But yeah, not much to say about the base figure. It's a good suited body painted green with some pretty decent hands and a good head sculpt. It's kind of weird to have a Professor X figure standing like this for one of these reviews, though. So let's fix that by also taking a look at Professor X's hover chair. I don't think this counts as an accessory since it's bigger than the actual Professor X figure, and I mean, come on, he needs this thing. I love the way this looks. It's such a good representation of the sort of X-Men the Animated Series style hover chair. There's so much sculpted detail onto it. I like the addition of this little silver panel right here. Looking at the back, you can see more of these details, and there's even details on the inside of the seat, a bit of nice, seat sculpting and texturing. It looks pretty dang good. And these compartments actually slide open, which reveals some little computers for Professor X to mess with, which is pretty dang cool. They're even painted on the inside, which I think is a nice touch. I should also mention that it sort of has this, I guess, jet-like stand at the bottom, which is very similar to something that comes with the Marvel Legends MODOK, except this one's white instead of orange and red. So yeah, here's Professor X in his hover chair, and yeah, this looks pretty dang spectacular. But there is one thing I have to ask. How good is this Professor X's articulation out of the actual hover chair? Well, if you've ever had a generic Marvel Legends suited body, you know how this is gonna go. He's got a ball joint and a disc hinge for the head articulation, which lets him look up pretty far, look down a fair bit, gets a little bit of tilt side to side, but it's more of a wobble, and spinning all the way around. His arms can spin all the way around and raise, well, under 90 degrees. He's got bicep swivel, which lets you turn his arms all the way around. Double jointed elbows with a pretty good bend. Marvel Legends style wrist articulation that spins around and hinges forward and back. For the torso articulation, he's got a waist swivel and an ab crunch. It lets him hunch forward this far, which is pretty decent. Not much arched back because of the actual coat overlay, but his torso does spin all the way around. Moving down below his belt, and he's got Marvel Legends style ball jointed hips with about a 90 degree kick, and well, not very good split, but he does have the Marvel Legends style thigh cut that lets you spin his legs all the way around. But I don't think the leg articulation is too important for Professor X. Either way, though, he does have double jointed knees, which get a pretty good bend, along with Marvel Legends style ankles that, well, don't really want to hinge forward much, but they do hinge back and pivot side to side. So overall, yeah, pretty basic articulation for Professor X. But most of the time, you're just going to have him sitting in either a wheelchair or a hover chair, so I don't think it's much of an issue. Unless you're using this as like a custom Norman Osborn, which I have seen some people do. Either way, decent articulation for a suited body. Moving on to the figure comparisons, and I elected to have Professor X in his hover chair, since I feel like that's a more interesting comparison than just a generic, suited Marvel Legends body. Starting off with the standard male and female comparisons, we have Renew Your Vows, Spider-Man, and Spinneret. But moving on to the X-Men, and we of course have to start out with everyone's favorite fuzzy 5'4" Canadian, Wolverine, fittingly in his X-Men the Animated Series style tiger stripe outfit, specifically the versions from X-Men 97 and Marvel vs. Capcom. For some other versions of Wolverine, though, we have Astonishing X-Men and the live-action Deadpool and Wolverine version of Logan. For some of Xavier's earliest students, though, we have Scott Summers, Cyclops, and Jean Grey, Marvel Girl, in their original X-Factor uniforms. Here's hoping we also get Angel, Beast, and Iceman in these uniforms to match these two. But for some more X-Men the Animated Series related stuff, we have the X-Men 97 versions of Gambit and Rogue. Staying on the topic of X-Men 97, though, we have Nightcrawler from that same series, and also the Target-exclusive Black Suit retro card Storm. And for some larger members of the X-Men, we have Beast and Colossus. But for a comparison I wanted to try solely for head swapping, we have the Fox Universe X-Men, Patrick Stewart as Professor X. In case you wanted to try and recreate the look of Professor X from Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. Unfortunately, though, the skin tones don't match, so you'd probably have to swap out the hands with the Fox Professor X, and also repaint the neck if you want it to fully match. Also, here's the comic Professor X in the movie Professor X's wheelchair, which is probably how I'm gonna be displaying this guy, since it takes up a lot less room in the display than the hover chair. But moving past the X-Men and into the most important comparison for any Professor X figure, we of course have Magneto. Since, can you really have one without the other? But hey, since we brought out Magneto, we should bring out some other important X-Men antagonists. Starting off, we have the deluxe version of the Blob, the Gamerverse version of Professor X's half-brother, the Juggernaut. I did say in my Juggernaut review that I'd show him with this hover chair Professor X later down the line. And for some of the larger figures I haven't brought out in far too long, we have the Toy Biz Apocalypse Build-A-Figure, and the absolutely gargantuan Marvel Universe Masterworks Sentinel. And I'm putting him here since I forgot about him earlier. The true result of Professor X and Magneto's bond, Onslaught, which was born from the worst parts of both their minds for a massive, very, very over-the-top 90s event. Yes, this is a real character, I'm not making this up. But, as is tradition, here's the Marvel Legends Professor X with Hoverchair with Hitmonkey and Goliath. Now, the next question is, what accessories does this Professor X come with? Well, unfortunately, besides the Hoverchair, he doesn't come with much. Doesn't come with any alternate hands, but he does come with this separate blanket piece that you can put over his legs in the Hoverchair, which does add a fair bit to the look. And of course, the classic Cerebro helmet from the comics. Now, I do like the sculpt of the actual helmet, but the psychic effect behind it, I don't like how it looks. It looks too much like a solid white. It just isn't translucent enough. Luckily, though, you can actually just pop it out of the back of the Cerebro helmet, and there. I'd say that's a pretty good improvement. But there is one more accessory Xavier comes with, and it's a very weird one, since it's not actually for this Xavier figure. It's this head sculpt. Now, for a while, I had no clue who this was, but this is apparently a head sculpt for the X-Men villain, the Shadow King. I believe that's his name, at least. Now, what most people do with this head sculpt that I've seen is they place it on a body of a bulky suited character like Kingpin, and also give it the hands of a figure on the Monster Venom body mold, because it's got those big, big claws. And yeah, it doesn't look bad. I don't know how accurate this is to Shadow King's actual design, but it does look pretty neat. But I don't know if I'm ever going to be using it, since I have no clue who Shadow King is, and this head sculpt honestly kind of scares me. But it is sculpted and painted pretty well. Alright, now time to talk about the least fun part of any figure, the pricing. Now, from what I've seen, this Professor X retails for around $40, but I actually managed to get it for Christmas on sale for around $30 at Big Bad Toy Store, which I am pretty satisfied with that pricing. Even the retail price isn't too bad. I mean, from around this time this figure was originally released, since it did get a reissue, it probably would have been $20 figure, with a $20 hover chair. Which I don't think is too bad considering the actual size of it. I mean, it's a pretty, a fairly big vehicle display piece. Ain't as big as one of Ghost Rider's motorcycles, but it is still a pretty impressive piece. But I do feel like the accessories are a little lacking. I kind of wish he came with just some more neutral hands too. I mean, I have plenty, but I feel like there should be some for people who don't have a massive selection of alternate Marvel Legends hands. And plus, it would make the set feel a little more complete. But overall, I really do like this Professor X and hover chair set. The articulation on Professor X ain't great, but I feel like for a character like Professor X, that doesn't really matter too much. And either way, for a suited body, it does still have pretty decent articulation for a more, for any civilian-style customs like Norman Osborn, maybe. And plus, the hover chair and some of its features are really good. I feel like the only place where this really falters is the accessories, because I kind of wish there were just maybe an alternate pair of hands for Xavier. Still, overall, even though this is a bit of an older, figure and vehicle set, I think I'm actually gonna give the Marvel Legends Professor X and hover chair set a 9 out of 10. It's a great set and definitely necessary for any comic X-Men display, and plus there's a fair bit of custom potential with this Professor X body, mainly for a Norman Osborn head swap. Either way, though, if you made it this far into the video, first of all, thank you very much for watching. And second of all, have a great day, 'cause you deserve it. Bye-bye.